Hello and welcome to another edition of Storytelling on Orchard Street. I'm your host, Pete Salameter, in the podcast studios of P&T Knitwear Bookstore at 180 Orchard Street. They got a great selection of books for you to browse and maybe buy. A nice cafe in the back to get a drink or something to eat while you're here. And they have lots of places to sit, and they have events here you should check out. Today's guest is Larry O'Connor. He's a Canada-born author whose books include Tip of the Iceberg, a fictive memoir that was shortlisted for Stanford University's William Saroyan Writing Prize. He is currently working on a novel called Witch Dog. The political allegory of our troubled times is set during the Salem trials of 1692, in which scores of innocent people were rounded up and accused of witchcraft. Also ensnared were two dogs. This is the story of one of them. He's also a writer on Substack. He has Run for Your Life and Run and Reading and Writing. He's an editor for Readsy.com, which is an online book publisher. And we also written a couple of books, Sustaining Social Change, which we're going to talk about later, Shameless Liars and Doge Squad. Welcome to the studio, my friend Larry.
Okay.
I don't know if the audience needs to know this, but this is our second try at doing this. There's a technical problem that we hope was fixed. It might not be. We're keeping our fingers crossed.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
So what we're going to do is we're going to, as I do with all my writers, I talk about their background growing up, how that might have influenced their writing or becoming a writer. And your book, Tip of the Iceberg, which I just finished. It's a great memoir, a fictive memoir. So we're going to talk about how that relates to your childhood and other things about growing up and becoming a writer, as I said. We're going to talk about your life as an editor and the things you're doing currently, mainly Witch Dog, and also the things you do on Substack and other things that you were involved with as a writer.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Right. And we met, we met at the cafe I work at, and found out that you and your wife are both writers. Now, Mary Morris was on a previous episode, which is, the number does not pop up in my head, but you guys can go back. It's a few episodes prior, and it's now your turn. Let's give a plug for Mary. She's got lots of great things you guys can read, but I recently read The Red House, which is fantastic. So let's give Mary a plug. So we're going to talk both about your childhood and how it relates to the book I just mentioned. Right?
Sure. That, I'm happy to do that.
Right.
Indeed.
So,
I should say, just before we start, and I didn't appreciate when we were talking about it earlier, I believe that the Shameless Liars book is by another Larry O'Connor.
oh, I'm so sorry.
But that's okay.
But how about the other one?
Yeah, I think both of those.
Oh, somebody else?
Are Larry O'Connor, who is another writer.
Sure.
But my second book, which I didn't put in my bio, which I should have, is called The Penalty Box. Now, it was published only in Canada. But it published well in Canada.
Okay.
So anyway.
It came up on a list and it looked like I had.
Right.
It was all right. Okay.
No problem.
Well, we just gave a plug to the other Larry.
Yeah,
O'Connor.
that's what I think.
Because there's only two Larry O'Connors in the world.
Our politics are vastly different.
Are
but
they
all
really?
The same. I love it.
Well, okay. Well, that was a funny little humorous.
Okay.
Okay, but still, we have lots to talk about.
We do.
Minus that little, yeah. So maybe someday I'll have the other Larry O'Connor.
Right. Well,
we'll have to talk about it.
You might. Get us on together. That's it.
Okay, so like I said, I just finished reading your book, and there's a couple of things that struck me about it. One was it was like juxtaposition of you being in Canada and being admired in the wilderness and the cold and explorers, Inuits and Eskimos and shipwrecks and all that kind of stuff.
That's right.
And at the same time, you had a very cold relationship with your father, right?
That's right. Indeed.
So it was those two things put together.
Yeah, this is what the tip of the iceberg was for me, which was the notion that you're trying to make connections with home and you go deep down to do that.
Right.
And of course, the iceberg sort of has the double metaphor of being the northern massive piece that takes down so many boats.
I saw a lot of photos online. I'm curious, or any of those yours in conjunction with what you do? Like, have you taken pictures up north, or?
No.
Oh, okay, all right.
Not really.
So they
They
were just put in there by.
I think they were put in by others.
Okay,
not by
all
me.
right. Anyway, I'm trying to recreate what we did the first time. It felt like it was going really
It
smoothly.
was going so well, and now is it Rocky? No, I think we're doing
I don't know.
fine.
We're having a good. We're together. We're talking.
Yeah.
So you wrote the book in your 50s, and the book ends when you're around 33.
That's right. That's right.
But most of the book is about. And the other thing I said earlier was it seemed like it also seemed like it was like you took all these bits and pieces that of which could be memories or could be stories, embellishments. It's almost like you took all this stuff and the whole idea of exploring the wilderness and your love of that and bits of your childhood and cut it up and put it on the table and made a book out of it.
Well, there's some truth to that. I mean, the manner in which I organized my thinking around Tip of the Iceberg was in those kinds of elements that one thinks about in terms of the North. Starting from cold and ice and darkness and so on. So we end up sort of finding a way in which we can look at the elements, talk about how they create distance, and interiority, which is something I talk about.
There was
how
one,
it is we're driven, and this winter would tell us.
There was one
right?
paragraph that was so devastating, where you're talking about what it's like to die in the cold.
That's right.
Where you can't feel your feet, and
right.
oh my God, it was intense.
Right.
He talked about also a lot about the explorers who died, and some of it was stubbornness. They didn't, take advice from the Eskimos. They couldn't. They might have been saved if they had.
100%. And of course, with that age of discovery period was just magical in terms of how it is that so many explorers were trying to find their way to China. And it was so economically based. And so the adventure stories, Charles Dickens, of course, was a great fan of the age of discovery. So.
Right. But your childhood, well, I asked you if you were into writing as a child and the first time. So
yeah.
What was your answer?
Well, we didn't have. I was one of those typical kids from the woods. From the woods. I mean, my folks who are going to be looking at this are going to be shaking their heads and saying, "You know what, Larry? That's not exactly the way it was. We were in a small town that was rural, that had its enclosures and so on. So in terms of how it is that I came to writing and reading, it wasn't going to be coming from that place, in part because it was a lovely place to grow up as a kid, but one was out skating. And,
I love the image of your father making the rink in the back.
100%. Exactly right.
So there were. It looked like there was some nice childhood memories, but
100%.
But typically anyway, you grew up in the 50s, so back then there weren't that many. It wasn't atypical for a father to be cold.
100%.
Or not cold, but distant from. It's a lot different now. I don't think people would understand that fathers were meant to be the breadwinner and sturdy and so on and so forth.
That's right. And it's one of the things about my book, and not to give things away, is that in the course of writing it, I didn't know a lot of the things about his childhood. And so consequently, by writing the book, I was able to exercise a lot of my negative feelings. I might say that it was a difficult relationship with him, and I found my way understanding him more.
And it's amazing, he's still alive. Right. And your mother too?
No, my mother passed last year, but thank you. My father is, just the other day, he told me he was the oldest man in his senior assisted.
Where is he living?
He lives in Owen Sound, Ontario.
Okay, so he's still in Canada.
Yeah, he sure is.
Right.
Yeah.
So you write the book and you're in your 30s. You were working in Windsor. Mm-hmm. And wasn't it that somebody, like a cousin or something, said something about your grandfather?
Yes,
and
that's
then
right.
you started doing research. So this part, because you said it's fictive, so some things that might not be true or just not 100%.
The way in which the story came down to me was through other family members. Now, there might have been a fictive aspect just in terms of how it is that I wanted to tell that story,
right.
how that came about.
Right.
But it was a household which was very reticent. It wasn't something that we talked about our what might have been those things that just weren't talked about.
Right. But anyway, it makes you do research into your father's, since he didn't talk about growing up and you didn't know anything about your grandparents on that side.
On that side, exactly.
Right. So you were a journalist at the time.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Right. You became an editor later in life?
I was a reporter for the first, 6-7 years, and then became an editor sort of afterward.
Right. So as a journalist, it was it wasn't that unusual for you to do that kind of research.
100%. No, it wasn't at all. It
Right.
was the kind of thing that, and then because there was such a story behind it, it became fodder for what eventually became Tip of the Iceberg. The
So
memoir.
we talked also about the fact that there's kind of like almost two endings of what could have happened. There was something traumatic happen in your grandfather, in your father's life with his father.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And that would maybe account for some of the way he was, and just the way he was with you, and you have a brother and a sister.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Right. And the reason why he maybe didn't talk about his life prior to being a father.
Mm-hmm. And those are the kinds of things, and as you point out, when you're growing up in the Depression, as my father was.
Well,
So I
that's
grew up
another
in the
factor
50s.
too. Yeah,
He
right.
grew up in the Depression.
Sure.
So when he lost his father, and I won't go into how,
Right.
but if he lost his father in a traumatic way, and then add that to the
Being
pressures,
poor and
that come to bear,
right.
being
And it meant his
relatively
mother had to
small
work
family, that's right.
more, and
That's
and
right.
he had to do more.
Right. I
Right.
mean, my father left school in 8th grade.
Yeah, same with my father. Depression.
Exactly.
Depression kid.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't finish high school, or
the whole idea of, let's say, emotional resonance, right? Which ends up being something that people talk about. I'm a book editor as well as a writer, and I frequently are talking about, this passage of writing could have a little more emotional resonance. But when I think about emotional resonance from the standpoint of my relationship with my father and that generation, there wasn't just a lot going on there.
So he did take you when you moved. I remember he drove you down to Windsor, right? And so you kind of were you sort of already maybe on the road to a better relationship at that point, or did it take longer than that?
It took longer. It definitely took longer than that. It was at that time. It was a part of me not understanding him,
right?
Because I remember It's funny when you mentioned that. It's sort of like the line came back to me that we drove like monks on a mission, which was kind of the way in which I remember it. We didn't talk, and I was going off to my first job outside of the region.
Right. Did you plan on reading from the book?
Yes.
Maybe now's a good time to do it.
I would really like to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that this is not something that we talked about, this one piece
Okay.
that I'm going to read from in this edition. I think we talked about it in the earlier edition, so this one little bit. Tip of the Iceberg. My earliest memory of color on canvas was a map of Canada at Dufferin Public School. I liked best the northernmost places, the perfect pink parts. Ellesmere, Boothia, Devon, flowers at the top of the world. The district of Franklin, what Eleanor had never seen. Eleanor Franklin was John Franklin, who was the explorer who famously perished in the Arctic. As a boy, I'd scale a towering snowbank near the elm in front of the house. The lower branches were almost within reach. Here I'd sit, covered head to toe in nylon, wool, and rubber. The coat's tie pulled taut was wet and fraying between my teeth. White fur and navy cloth deadened sound to murmurs. I imagined icebergs in dark water that rose into the sky. With a harpoon, I impaled seabirds, narwhals. Under the northern lights on an icy plain near an iceberg's peak, I wore tacks, the best skates money could buy, and lay down, skates up, looking at the craggy peak in relief against the gray sky. Later, I kept a picture book of the Titanic hidden in the shelves of the library at grade school. I had moved it from history to insect and garden, where people seldom came by, and I looked at it every chance I could get. I didn't ponder lost treasures on the seafloor, families who would never see their loved ones again, the pointlessness of their loss. I could not have cared less for the dead at that age. The only gold I had ever seen was plated on Father's watch. The only silver, the coins, Mom kept in a cigar box on her bedroom dresser. None of my relations, poor farmers in Canada, free foot soldiers in England, were scarcely able to sail aboard elegant ocean liners. None, as far as I knew, had even learned to swim. Instead, I was drawn to the floating mountain of ice, 10 times the size of the Titanic. The iceberg loomed beneath the ocean surface, the dark mass going off the page. The tip of the iceberg shuddered with the weight of what lay underneath.
Great. There's like, it's almost also, besides being a memoir, and also like a lot of different memories all put together, there's lots of parts of it that almost sound like poems.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
Was that on purpose?
That was totally on purpose. Yeah. Some of my best friends and poets who sort of like said, just like, this is a book of poetry. I didn't expect that. So I was, I'm so blessed to hear that response.
Right.
No, so it came from a pure place, and at that time I was early in my writing career, so I was very happy to hear that.
So was this the first book that you had published?
That's right. This was the first book. I published a novel afterward called, The Penalty Box.
What's that about?
The Penalty Box is, guess what? A father-son novel.
Okay.
Yeah.
But not you and your father.
No, it's the name of my character in that novel is Kyle Callender, and Kyle Callender was an escort to the Stanley Cup. And
what does that mean?
The escort to the Stanley, it's a kind of a good question for...
somebody who carries it around?
Yeah, somebody who carries around the cup.
Okay.
Yeah, a little story about that, which actually was the Stanley Cup was being shown at the NHL store back when it was on 6th Avenue and 47th Street, I think it was, but I don't know what they're elsewhere now, the NHL store. And anyway, I worked at the New York Post at that time, so we were across the road, just across 47th Street. So a friend of mine sort of like said, the Stanley Cup is there, it's next door. And I said, oh my gosh, I have to go and visit.
Of course.
I'm from Canada. I got to see the Stanley Cup. Maybe I'd even touch it. So because I hadn't at that point. Right. And so I said, great, thanks, Rico, thanks for the tip. And so I went down and raced over, and there was no cup. But there was a guy who had one of those, jackets, sort of like this. I recognized the jacket because I'm a longtime fan that it was a Stanley Cup escort jacket,
right?
And so that he would wear.
Right.
So I thought, I don't see the cup, I see the escort.
Right.
So I walked up to him and I said, Stanley Cup here. He said, well, you just missed it. Oh, and I said, well, and this is funny coming from a Canadian because I sort of like normally don't sort of tout my work, but I sort of like said it, and I had long published the Penalty Box, and I said, listen, I don't know whether you might know a book that was published in Canada that was about a Stanley Cup escort, And he said, "The penalty box?"
That's awesome.
And I said, "Yeah."
That's cool.
And he said, "That's a good book."
Yeah.
So,
all right, great.
so that was it.
Right.
That was my. That was a novel.
So let's just for the people listening or watching or whatever.
Sure.
They may not know this if they're not hockey fans. There's an actual big cup called the Stanley Cup. The winner of the final series in hockey gets
in professional hockey again.
Right. NHL gets this cup. And the cup is how many years old? 100 years old?
Oh, it's like listen, you're testing me, but it was like the oldest. It's the oldest cup that's continuously played for.
Right.
So I think it's from the 1890s.
Oh, it's that even older. Okay, I wasn't sure when. Yeah.
Well, the original mug, it was from not the base and everything.
So the team that wins gets to hold on to it.
Indeed.
Right,
That's
and sometimes they drink from it, and they have
right.
like well, at least when the night they win, they probably go
Yeah, exactly, right.
But they're not allowed to like bring it home or anything, are they? They have.
Oh yeah, that's the deal. And the Stanley Cup escort has to go.
But they go. Oh, I see.
So each player on the team gets, I think, just a few days with it.
Right.
During the course, during the summer.
Right, but there's an escort that keeps an eye on it.
Yeah, exactly. Just in case.
It's so crazy.
So people would sort of race off with it.
Right.
I find it to be just such a.
Did it ever go missing?
There's a story of it going missing. There are stories that are part of the lore. There's a wonderful story that I'm going to probably miss completely. I might miss it a little bit about how it is that, when the Montreal Canadiens were playing the Chicago Blackhawks and the Chicago. I believe this is true. If it's not, don't hold me to it. But it's not apocryphal. I don't think that. The cup was kept, I think it was in Chicago Stadium, and a Montreal fan sort of was very upset about the idea of Bobby Hull being the better player than anybody on the ice, and they were winning the Chicago Blackhawks, and so he went down and he broke into a case and he stole it, thinking that Montreal's not going to win, but I'm going to take the cup now. I think that it's some of those are lore stories.
And Montreal Canadiens at one time were the organization, but they haven't won in like how many years?
A few, I think. 1993.
Yeah, that's a long time.
That's a long time.
Not as long as I thought, but still a long time.
It's the last time a Canadian team won the Stanley Cup, which is another, difficult fact.
Interesting. Yeah, we talked. This is this past Sunday. We're recording this on Saturday, the 28th of February. It's not going to go up online right away. But United States just beat the Canadians in hockey.
That's right.
And you came into the cafe, and I said, "So who'd you root for?"
That's right. Yeah. You called me on that, and
I guess you couldn't lose either way.
I couldn't lose either way.
You could say,
That's
"Well,
right.
if Canada won, it's like my home. That's where I grew up." And
Canada Borden was the first thing you said today, and so I found myself sort of being rooted, being really, the blood was really Canadian blood that I watched that game with. But no, that was a funny moment.
So just curious. So when in the book, the book ends when you're in your 30s and you're doing that research about your father's past life. And you're in Windsor, which is, you kind of explained to me in a long way that I kind of sort of couldn't follow completely. But it was kind of weird because Windsor is south of Detroit. And because I'm reading the book, I'm like, wait, he's saying, he's telling me he's going south, but he's...
Right,
but
exactly.
he's in Detroit and he's going south to Canada. I had a tough time with that.
I think there's a. I think
I was like, wait, am I just not reading correctly, or?
I'm not a Jeopardy watcher, but it's something like that. If you're in Windsor and you look north, Windsor, Ontario, and looking north, what are you looking at? Is kind of like the question.
Right.
And of course, those who live in that part of the world say, well, Detroit, Michigan is north of Windsor. Windsor is just the way the geography comes down.
Right.
And I did sort of make mention of how it is the geography of my hometown is configured on that that part of southern Ontario, which is, if you look at it upside down, southern Ontario, you'll see that the trunk of what is an elephant, it very much presents as an elephant, is at Windsor. So it's a tip of it, and then you follow its head, and then the back, and then the tail is a peninsula, the Bruce Peninsula, and then you come down into the harbor.
I got to go home and look at the calendar.
And you'll see that, in that very private place on the elephant happens to be where I come from.
Right.
Owen Sound.
But you went to Detroit for fun because you were young. I guess Windsor wasn't happening for
Windsor
a young guy.
Windsor was known as Sin City.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I got that wrong.
No.
Okay.
It was a place that Americans would come to because it was one of the.
Oh, maybe I had it
places.
backwards.
They had exotic dancers.
That was in Windsor.
And Windsor, that's right.
Okay.
But I would go to.
Because you went to
Detroit for fun.
You went to exotic dancers with your cousin.
I would go to.
In the book, I mean.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I did.
And that's what spurred on the research for your.
Yes. Indeed, that conversation. So
But that part was true.
No.
There was no cousin that came from.
No, there was a cousin
trucker.
that did. In terms of some of that was sort of. I did have a cousin who we would do things like that. And so I did sort of create some drama energy in terms of how it is the story started. But back to Detroit. I would go across to Detroit, and that's how I come to New York and fall in love with New York for the first time, which was I would fly People's Express for $99 and then go to New York back in the days when
from
we did
Detroit.
that. Yes, I went frequently, and so I fell in love with being in New York, and the rest is history.
So how old were you when you came to?
When I was doing
officially in New York.
I was 33, 32.
Oh, so almost right after the book.
Yeah,
where the book ends.
Yeah, yeah. So around that time, exactly around that time. So it was really a closure of my Canadian story, and so my American story is followed. And I did say that I was working on a project that is very American content, which I call Witch Dog. I've yet to. I'm in the process of finishing it, so it's not something that I'm reading from. Or sort of
okay. But can we talk about it?
Sure.
So tell me about it. Tell me about it.
It was about. Not that long ago, maybe it was about 8 years ago. I think there was a book by the name by a famous, a book, a nonfiction historical book by Stacy Schiff, the biographer called Witches, in which I was enthralled. I knew the Crucible and I knew the story of Salem, but coming from Canada, I was coming at it from a new place, and so when I read the book, I read it from a place of going. It was one of those things as a writer, you sort of, and as a poet, you sort of like fall into, and you say, okay, I can't stop reading.
Was there anything like that in Canada?
How's that? Oh, no.
No, okay.
No, nothing.
Just curious.
No, not that I
So it's
know
a very
of.
American thing.
Yeah, so it's one of the quintessential American, dark Puritan stories.
Right.
So I fell into that space, reading the book, and sort of became aware. And I don't know whether, I'm sure it was in the book, but it was something I read afterward in a review. I believe it was in Harper's, if not Harper's Atlantic, but Ruth Franklin, the book critic, was writing about this Schiff book, and she referred to 150 people who were accused, not necessarily convicted of witchcraft, were sort of like caught up in 1692, and 2 dogs, she said. And so I said,
2 dogs.
Wow.
Right.
That's amazing. And so I started. And I've always been a dog person, like, whatever.
Okay.
And actually dangerous dogs too, but we, whatever. I mean, we rescue dogs and so on. So I was completely drawn to the idea of writing from the point of view of a dog that wasn't just accused, but was, also, sort of found guilty of witchcraft, if you can believe it.
Wow.
the truth of the fact is, and I'm sort of like, I'm playing a lot with like what's true and what's not true, and we've talked about that some.
Right.
Of those two dogs, I'm not going to say that they were prosecuted in the, if they sat up in the witness box and so on, and
That's
sort of like that
crazy.
happened.
Right.
That did not happen. I mean, but, and there's no sense of, and there's nothing in the record that would say that they went through any kind of a process that ended up to be found guilty per se. They were just accused of rape.
If it's but it's bad enough. The whole witch idea is bad enough, but
I would think
but then
so.
accusing a dog of it is like what? I think they drank too much hard cider or something.
I think there was that. There was that, and of course there was the rye fever. The idea of toxic rye back in those days. It got wet. It was very very wet winter, wet season, and there was some sort of it's been a since kind of debunked story, but that had hallucinatory properties if you were to sort of like ingest a lot of this toxic rye.
Okay, so I got to ask you, did I ask you this in this episode or the one that we had to abort?
Yeah.
The idea that there were two endings in this book.
Right.
Tip of the iceberg. No. So, something happened bad to your father, and that could be part of the reason why your relationship was the way it was. So I'm going to have to wait until this is over to find out which of the two were correct. Or either of them? Or is there a third option?
That's very funny because it's one of the things I don't want to intrude on the experience of the reading of Tip of the Iceberg, because it's one of the things I think that is true of.
Did I say too much already? Do we have to edit this out?
Yeah, I don't think so. We're cool. We're
okay.
Absolutely cool. Now, it's one of the things I think about. The way in which there's secrets that we have in our families and how they play out, and I think what happens when you are trying to reimagine a moment, particularly those moments that are ill-defined. It's never really been told. You've never talked about it.
My father hardly talked about his past.
So imagine.
My mother did more.
So if there's one thing that you're trying to unravel in their lives, you're stuck as a writer to sort of make suppositions and make those. Hopefully, when you're making them at the end of Tip of the Iceberg, as I did here, you're making them in a believable way, as if to say, that's how he's able to go on. That's how his father was able, and his brother, everybody was able to go on because of that resolution, that redemption. Or it could be like something darker, and then you say, well, wow, I mean, why didn't that, harm them even more? And they just had more to get through.
Well, I will say the first one was devastating. The second one was kind of like bad, but yeah. All right.
Yeah. Well,
we're going to talk later.
Okay, great. Okay. Thank you for that.
You were a journalist. What made you go to the editing side of writing?
That's I think there was it's funny. I was talking to about that. I've recently retired from that, and I'm editing books and really enjoying that more of a freelance basis. So I'm not working full time in the way that I was for 4 decades. But
when you all those years, were you with the same? Like, were you with different publishers, or was it? Did you get editing jobs from the publishers or from the writers themselves?
Oh, you mean in terms of the book editing now?
Yeah, right.
It's, I do it on the platform readseed.com.
Oh, that's right. You were an editor at the Post.
Yes, in terms of the newspapers.
Right.
Right. I was the editor. I worked at multiple small papers in Canada up until the Windsor Star. I worked, I had a good, solid editor job there. But in terms of reporting, I was a correspondent for the Globe and Mail at a certain point when I was working in North Bay, Ontario, and I worked in North Bay just before I came. North Bay is not a city that was going to be known by a lot of our viewers and listeners, but it's a place on Lake Nipissing, west of Ottawa.
Right.
And I was running a journalism program up there, and it was at was at that time that I sort of was writing a lot of short stories and poetry, and sort of like began to sort of move away from journalism per se.
I see. Right.
Yeah, but I mean, I worked but I enjoyed. Question. The question was what why did you move away from the reporting? I was a correspondent for the Toronto Globe and Mail when I was in North Bay, and while I was doing that, I just felt the pressure of reporting was something that I felt that I was getting removed from myself as a writer. So I was working on my own writing at the time, and I thought, I don't want to be the guy who ends up going out in the middle of the night and chasing down a fire.
Right, right. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
I want to be able to, on some level, work my shift and then go home and work my other half of my brain.
And you were married and had family.
Yeah. Right. At that time,
because you've been married for how many years? A pretty long time, right? It's like,
it wasn't. We met when I was in North Bay, so so we married shortly after that.
Right. How did that happen? Was she visiting?
No, that is a wonderful origin story which I didn't write, but Mary wrote, and it appeared in the Modern Love column in the New York Times.
Oh, nice.
So, so briefly, is that I was in North Bay, Ontario, when I was running the journalism program. I submitted, a dozen poems and 2 short stories to the Richmond Commonwealth University's writing workshop that was going on in the summer of 1988.
Okay.
And in the summer of 1988, Mary Morris, who was a professor of creative writing in California, came to that conference. And Mary was my teacher. There.
Look at you.
How about that? So that's one way of telling the story. She tells it in a different way.
You were hot for teacher, I guess.
You could look it up
as the Van Halen song.
In the Modern Love column of the New York Times, you can get her
All
side.
Right. Is it still up online? I got to check it out.
Oh yeah, right. That can be found. Just Mary Morris, Modern Love. Virginia is for lovers.
When you were working at the Post and editing, did you write short stories, or did you do any other creative writing, or was that just the job of being an editor kind of took all your energy?
One of the things that it's really worked out since I've been in the United States is, or at least until I can't say enough about the places that I worked that allowed me to do my writing as well as to do the editing that paid the bills. So I ended up. I'd be working. I wouldn't go into a shift when I was working at the Post for 16 years. I would go in at like 12:30 in the afternoon, and so I would have the mornings to write.
Right. Okay. Cool. Right.
And that was pretty much the case. I worked at the Wall Street Journal as well, and a job that had similar hours. So.
Right. But you were working at the Post when you wrote this book, The Iceberg?
When I published that book in 2000, I was working at the Wall Street Journal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I didn't join the Post until 2004.
Oh, I see. So, right.
Yeah. But I would always been working on stories, on essays, and publishing a variety of things. I've done actually also some radio work. So I have some NPR essays and things like that.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So, funny enough, I did something around the time of 9/11 because there's another story, is that I was going to work that day, and did some writings based around my experiences around 9/11 that were published.
Right.
Yeah. 110 Stories is one of them, an anthology of 110 stories of those people who shared their experiences of that day. And consequently, I did a few. I think 3. Jackie Leiden, a good pal of ours, was working at NPR in those days, and she helped me sort of get those audio essays online.
Nice.
So I haven't. So that was the kind of work I did.
Right. What did you bring? Anything else that you would like to read?
You know what? I do have something else, which is just a little further on in the tip of the iceberg, if I could read
Sure,
that.
go ahead.
Yeah. And this is, in this part, it reflects back to my father, because I think, as we've talked, my father, and it figures very much in the story of Tip of the Iceberg, insofar as my relationship to him and how it is that he sort of was a mystery to me at a certain point, and it's in that vein that I'm going to read from.
Okay.
Most winters, we had a skating rink out back. From the time I was 9 years old, I watched my father flood the rink. Night after winter night, Father stood outside in the cold, while I rested my head against crossed arms on the kitchen table and watched him through the window. Behind me, from another room, the television shone like a blue moon. Before me, my father, a shadowy figure in a dark coat, his fedora tugged down his forehead like a laborer in a Van Gogh, watered the rink. Except for a gentle tossing motion of his right wrist, Father was still. Mist rose from the long snake of a hose and from the spot where water fell. Water that didn't freeze on contact flowed in rivulets covering the rink, filling the low spots. I came to believe that the flooder of the rink was not my father. The man who spread water every night when the weather turned cold became Lord Dufferin, a gray eminence, the namesake of my public school. Sometimes he became Lord Dufferin, a gray eminence. Sometimes he became an old man hockey player, a Bruin, a Blackhawk. At others, an Eskimo, a man of the North.
All right. Yeah. So, did you play hockey?
Yes, I did.
I mean, everybody played hockey.
Everybody played hockey.
Right, but not. Did you not? Like, how far did you get with it? You were on teams, or?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
right.
I was on teams,
right.
And the backyard rink was, that is definitely not fictive. That's the real deal. That was when this was the first writing. It's very different, somewhat different. But the first writing I did for Tip of the Iceberg was the memory of my father flooding the rink. Mm-hmm. I skated before I walked.
Right.
So I was like one of those kids.
Right.
So I was 2 years old, 2 or 3. There's a home movie of me sort of like moving around.
Right.
So I played on ice hockey teams. Never played on the teams that sort of were shown so wonderfully in the Olympics, obviously. But my brother was the hockey player of our
I was going to mention that you mentioned that in the book.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, so he was
semi-professional.
So he played up until the junior ranks, and so those ranks where one can get recruited into the NHL.
Right.
So no, he didn't play semi-pro. He sort of was. He could have. He didn't get injured. He sort of like just went in other directions.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's only how many people actually make it to professional sports. That's what we kind of take it for granted, like how good those people are.
We sure do.
But you lived it. You know what it's like, and your brother came closer than you did. But it's not. It's a big leap.
That's exactly that.
Yeah.
And these are the places where Owen Sound is one of those places where where those kinds of players are find their way into
Right.
the NHL.
So how far are you into the new book?
I'm pretty much finished the new book.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Right.
I mean, it is something that is in a. I've had different versions of this book at different times, but I feel very confident about what is going actually around to agents now. So
Okay, so it's
I don't
too
know.
it's too early to know
talk
projected
about it.
projected
Exactly, right.
publish date.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, right.
I'd like to be in a position to be able to say that
Right.
to folks, but no,
Okay.
that's not just yet.
But people, tell the listeners, well, the viewers, about your Substack. So you're
Sure.
an avid runner.
I am. As a matter of fact, that's I think there's something to be said with just sort of like backing off the writing thing a little bit. Is that I had a health setback about 2 years ago. It'll be 3 years in June, and it might have led to me sort of retiring a little bit earlier, or perhaps when it might have stayed on. I was working at CNBC at the time, as an editor, and it was really sort of, I've always run, but I felt my age had caught up to me a little bit, and so there was a time when I sort of was uncertain what was going to be happening next, and that was in 2023, as I mentioned earlier to you, and I think it was in this segment that I lost my mother in 2024,
Right.
And so there was.
I only laughed. I'm not about your mother dying. I'm sorry.
Understand.
It came. It was the timing was a little weird, but we're both having a little memory. Like, wait, did we say that the first time this or during this?
Wait a minute.
episode?
Could it be that, or is it this?
Yeah.
But my mom passed from complications that were related to her dementia, and I sort of at that point. I'd run marathons, and I hadn't run one since 2019. And
Right.
my 70th birthday was coming up in October of 2025, and so I projected after my mom passed that I would run for charity, and I did.
Okay.
I ran for the Alzheimer's Association, the marathon in November.
Okay.
So it was but I mentioned the hospital stuff and so on, to just sort of like say that, if you have the opportunity to be able to sort of like do what you want to do, manage your life in such a way that you can get back, you can recover in such a way that you can follow your passion in the way that this has always been a passion of mine. And it's, it allowed me to fulfill it, which is that I ran the marathon and was
It's amazing.
Not that many 70 and plus year old people that finished the marathon this year.
Well, plus you did it. So was that the first one you ran since the 19?
Since 2019, right?
That's
So
pretty
it's 6
amazing
years.
because let's face it, at our age, 6 years means a lot.
That's right. We could slow down a lot.
Because I remember
in 6
I was
years. Exactly.
when I was reaching 60, I'm like, I'm gonna get in the best shape I've ever been in, and I kind of
At
did.
the time, exactly. Good for you.
Yeah, but it's a lot harder now. That was 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And man, now I feel like I spend most of my time. I exercise every day, but I feel like I'm exercising so I don't get worse. Not that I don't get better. Do you understand that?
Yeah, I understand.
So
entirely.
suddenly I have.
You're holding the line.
I mean, I started physical. It seems like the last 20 years I'm in physical therapy every few years. But I had to go to physical therapy last year for knee and hip issues, and then all of a sudden my sciatica. I started having problems with my sciatica, and that's taken up a lot of my mental space when I exercise.
Mm-hmm. I see you on the bike, so
Yeah.
I see that's what you do.
Yeah, but I do. I go to physical therapy twice a week. But
Oh, boy.
it's not getting rid of the problem. It's just stopping it from being crippling.
From worsening.
Yeah. So, as custom, I always read one of my poems
Please.
on
Yeah,
the show.
indeed.
So I picked something that would be the opposite of yours.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The idea of the real cold. This is based on a true story. The poem's called Fire of Love. Oh God, I forget the name of it now. But my wife's company. There's this couple, Katya and Maurice Kraft. Mm-hmm. They were volcano researchers, and
interesting. Okay.
They would go really close to volcanoes to research, what it means and how it happens and the telltale signs and when it's going to would erupt.
Sure.
And people didn't take them seriously. They did this great research, and they would go places and say, "You're going to have a problem," this and maybe in 2 years, whatever it was. And there were a couple of really bad volcanoes that killed people, and they didn't listen to their advice.
Goodness. Okay.
But anyway, my wife's company was involved with there was a great documentary. I think it may be called Fire of Love. I'm sorry. I forget. I should have written down a note. But it's a great documentary about the couple, and they did actually die at an eruption.
Wow.
But they were doing what they loved. They researched together.
Right.
And anyway, so this is the poem. It's called Fire of Love. Hot, bubbling red lava coursing through my veins. Ever since I had you by my side, we chased eruptions and excitement and discovery. Diving into danger was our thing. No fear in doing extraordinary acts. Floating on bubbling lakes of sulfuric acid, melting metal tools while you paced on the shoreline. We shared our research, photos, and film. After months of being in hot, rough, and rowdy terrain, our goal to educate sometimes fell on deaf ears. How many died because those in charge didn't heed our warnings? But you can't outrun plumes of hot gray ash when you were living on the edge of things. We died side by side in love after all those years. Our shared calling was our demise. Going once too many times into the fire of love. It couldn't have been any other way.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a great documentary.
Yeah. Wow. And it's a fit. The Fire of Love and all the snow and ice that I threw in this book.
So I figured I try to pick things that kind of go along with my guest's story. So.
Wonderful. And it also works with the melt that we have all around.
That's true.
Now, so,
yeah.
Oh, that's over, the snow and ice.
Well, tomorrow's March.
Almost over. What am I saying? It's
March
over?
1st, when we record this. And then next weekend is Daylight's Savings, Spring Forward.
All right.
But we had an extraordinary winter, and it must have made you feel at home.
It totally made me feel at home. And it's really funny, which is to say, I have a couple of things that I'm doing that is not on the writing side. One is that, and I'm not allowed to say, but I've sort of have signed up, and I've gotten a call back to do be an extra. I sort of was a high school sort of person who loved the arts, theater,
right.
And so with the idea of being an extra at my age is kind of a funny thing.
Sure.
And the other thing, which is speaking to the snow, is that the Ma'am Danny's call for citizen shovelers.
Right. Did you do it?
Yeah, well, I am going to get my shoveling papers next week, early
Good
next
for
week.
you.
Yeah,
You in that kind of shape that you can be a citizen shoveler? Because let me tell you, on Monday, so we're talking about this past snowstorm, which is one of the bigger ones we've had in a long time. Not the biggest one by far.
2017 or
1996 was insane.
That was insane.
Yeah. Anyway, so like I said, I work in a cafe, and I'm the opener, and I got up at 3:30, left the house at 4:30 to get to work early on Monday, because we have a lot of property. We're on the corner, but we do have a snowblower. It's battery operated snowblower, but there was too much snow for the snowblower because it's not like a highly.
It's one of those. Yeah,
it's one. It was just too much snow to use that. Yeah. So I did it by hand. I did that whole corner.
You did?
Yeah, so maybe I could be a citizen shoveler.
I think you could.
Except that, and by the way, we opened on time. Yeah, I did that before we opened.
I am impressed. I'm actually impressed that you opened it all.
And I did it by myself. I opened by myself. It was supposed to be a second person, and they couldn't make it in. So anyway.
Oh, wow. Listen,
But did you
That's real.
This was a really
That's
cold
real
winter
stuff.
for New Yorkers. But were you walking around going, "Oh, I can't believe they're making such a fuss. It's not that cold."
There was a week that I was as cold as everybody else.
Yeah,
And
okay.
I've been here long enough.
That you're getting used to this temperature.
Of not being that person, having my coat open
Right.
to the frigid temperatures.
Or like the teenagers that go out in the winter in shorts.
Yeah, that's right. What they do. Yeah, exactly.
So what else do you want to say about? So how can people find you? I mean, at the end we'll put up information how people can find you, but you can talk about what's the best way to learn more about what you're doing, find out when the book comes out, and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. I mean, I have a website that I don't use and haven't been looking at for very much, but you can look at the works that I've done that I haven't talked about at www.larryo'connor.net. I'm in my Substack that I'm very happy with, which I've been posting a lot more on lately, is Run for Your Life, as you said, and you can find that by. I think it's, what is it? R4Y Life.
Okay.
And, and I don't know how many folks are substacking. Those two things. I used to be very, busy with Meta, but that sort of gets into a whole other conversation surrounding politics. And so I'm moving away from certain social media. But
I almost would do that if I wasn't doing these type of things. I have to promote them as much as I can. Yeah, but social media has changed quite a bit.
I hear you loud and clear.
It was probably more fun in the beginning.
Right. But those are my public places where people can find me.
Okay. Any last thoughts for the listeners?
I would like to say that just to leave with the notion of something from Substack that I do, which is that is to just to follow your passion. I mean, I've sort of talked about a lot of that, or I feel like I have, or I feel like in terms of finding your own material, finding what it is that you want to write about, and this staying true to the idea that write it even if you think that people aren't reading it.
Right.
It's just like write it and write it and post it, and you'll be surprised at what the response is. And it's not necessarily one that's going to show up in multiple likes. It's going to show up in other ways.
And what advice would you give as an editor to somebody who does want to write a book?
I think two things. One is to be true to the kind of material that you have. They say write what you know, which is your classic sort of notion. I think there's a strong sort of connection between sort of saying, well, my story doesn't really matter because it sounds like everybody else's story.
Right.
But I think that there's the truth that I'm finding and working now at Reedsy now since 2000. I've done 5 years of this, and there's a lot of conversations that I have with people who start from that place. They sort of say, I don't have a story to tell. And there's a wonderful sort of collection of works by the author, and it's a good place to start for people to find out whether or not you have a story to tell, which is Joe Brainerd wrote a book. And he's sort of was very big in sort of the Beat era period of time, and here in New York he had quite a standing in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and he wrote a book called I Remember, in which he just wrote every one of his I Remembers in a poetic-like fashion, and in writing through his I Remembers, it came to his material. Right. So, I mean, I think that's one piece of advice I'd give to one of those persons who says, I don't think I have an ordinary life. And then you say, well, what do you remember?
Right.
And then you sort of talk about what your first taste was.
Right.
And then you say, why does that feel that? And each one sort of ends up being like a little nugget.
Right.
And they can add up to to work that they never would have thought that they would be able to compose.
But you must be pretty proud when you help somebody and the book does well. I mean, because a good editor does. It's a very important part of the process.
Right, 100%.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
Indeed.
I'm going to play the theme song and talk us out. You've been listening to Storytelling on Orchard Street. I'm your host, Pete Salamiter, and with me today was Larry O'Connor, who we've been talking about his book, Tip of the Iceberg. We've also talked about a book that hopefully will come out, let's just say, the end of this year.
Let's just say that.
That sounds good.
I think that's a good way of saying it.
Okay, and it'll be called Witch Dog. And again, he's on Substack. We're going to put your information on the screen once this is over. Thank you to P&T Knitwear Bookstore for the studio time, and for Natalia, Natalia, for helping me early on. We're hoping that there was no audio issue with this, but we'll find out when I get home, I suppose. But anyway, thank you all for listening, and thank you, Larry, for being the guest today.
It was terrific. Thank you, Pete.